Thank you, Senator Hagerty. Senator Van Hollen.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Secretary, great to see you. And thank you for your support for the men and women at the State Department, including the Foreign Service as well as the Civil Service. A few years ago, I teamed up with my colleague, Senator Sullivan, and we passed, with the support of members of this committee in the Senate, the Foreign Service Families Act, which is designed to help us continue to retain and to recruit the finest diplomatic corps in the world. We're in the implementation process. My staff just met with your team yesterday. We're pleased with the progress that's being made, and I'm just asking for your assurance today that we will continue to implement those parts that are still in progress.
Yes, absolutely, because it is critical that we be able to attract and retain the best talent available. This is an important component of that because this is something that you've known and lived more than as much as anyone. This is a family enterprise. It's not simply the Foreign Service officer that is there. It's the entire family. So we want to make sure that we are finding ways through the act to support them, to create greater opportunity for them, because that's the most effective way to attract and retain people.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Let me turn now to the recent meeting between Putin and President Xi, which took place, of course, just days after the ICC confirmed what we knew, which is that Putin was a war criminal. This case based on the fact that they've abducted Ukrainian children and taken them forcefully to Russia. President Xi has reiterated the fact that that relationship between Russia and China knows, quote, no limits. The friendship knows no limits. You and others in the administration have warned of the possibility that China would start providing material military support to Russia in its fight against Ukraine, and that would be a red line that would trigger severe economic consequences in the form of sanctions. I'm glad you've established that very clearly. In order for that to be effective, we need to make sure our allies and partners are on board. That includes our European partners. It also includes our democratic partners like South Korea, Japan, Australia, others in East Asia and around the world. So my question is, do we have a break the glass plan? Because what we don't want to see happen is if China were to provide military assistance, that we're all fluttering around trying to figure out the way forward. Obviously, imposing economic sanctions on Chinese entities is tougher than on Russian entities, given the more interconnected nature of the economies. But do we have a break the glass plan with our partners in the event China were to provide military assistance to Russia?
Thank you, Senator. Let me say two things quickly about this. First, as you noted, going back to day one of the Russian aggression, we have been very clear with Beijing about the serious problem that any material lethal support to Russia for the aggression against Ukraine would pose for us and we believe for countries around the world. President Biden shared this directly with President Xi about 3 weeks into the aggression when they spoke by video conference. We've reiterated that. And as we've seen them consider it more actively in recent months, we have doubled down in making clear to them the serious problem that this would pose. But what's important is this, and it's to your point, it's not just us. When we shared with allies and partners some of the information we had about the active consideration that China was giving to providing this lethal material support to Russia, this galvanized a number of other countries, all of whom directly engaged senior Chinese leadership on the question. And so we're actively talking to them about what it is we would do in the event that happened. But my hope is that China, having heard not just from us, but from many countries, including countries with which it's trying to curry more favorable relations, that it heard them and heard us and will not cross that line.
Well, Mr. Secretary, I appreciate that. I just think it's going to be really important that we have in place a specific plan with our partners so that we are ready to go and that China knows we're ready to go, because the deterrent effect of that, I think, depends on their clearly understanding the impact. If I could turn now to the Israeli-Palestinian issue. Since the new Israeli government was formed, high-level members of our government have visited Israel, including yourself. Just a few days ago, President Biden had a phone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu. The readout from that call indicated that President Biden underscored the need to, quote, maintain the viability of the two-state solution, unquote, and the importance of abiding by the two agreements that the United States helped to recently broker between Israelis and Palestinians at Aqaba and later at Sharm el-Sheikh. Those agreements committed Israel to, I quote, stop discussions of any more settlement units for 4 months and stop authorization of any outposts for 6 months. Within days of the Aqaba agreement, as you know, Prime Minister Netanyahu rushed to disavow it, said that doesn't apply. And then just days after the meeting at Sharm el-Sheikh and after the phone call between President Biden and Prime Minister Netanyahu, the Knesset voted to pass a law to lift the ban on re-entering 4 settlements, including Homesh, that Israel had committed to evacuate 20 years ago. State Department spokesperson Patel said the move was, and I quote, inconsistent with Israel's recent commitments to de-escalating Israeli-Palestinian tensions, and said it was a clear contradiction of undertakings the Israeli government made to the United States. I'm assuming that you also support and endorse those comments made by the State Department spokesperson.
Senator, I do, but it's also based on what we hear, and I've heard directly from Israeli leadership as well as the Palestinian Authority about the desire for both sides to see the violence that has reached record levels in recent months de-escalate and to try to get a period of calm. And that's clearly in the interest of both sides, and it's an interest that at least Prime Minister Netanyahu has expressed directly to me. And there are a number of things that go with that. You've cited some of them.
Mr. Secretary.
If we see steps inconsistent with that, I think it does contradict what we believe both Israelis and the Palestinian Authority are seeking to do, and what they've said to us is in their own self-interest.
Right. No, I appreciate that. Obviously, we need to see compliance on both sides, the Palestinian Authority and the government of Israel. But this was a very official act by the Knesset, just days after the phone call between Prime Minister Netanyahu and President Biden. So I'm pleased to see you endorse the statement by the State Department spokesperson. But it seems to me that we look very weak when we continually make statements without any kind of consequence. So I guess my final question to you is, what are we prepared to do? What is the Biden administration prepared to do if you see continuing violations by either side of this agreement?
Look, I don't want to speculate or get into a hypothetical about where this may go and what we would do. I can say that both the Israeli government and the Palestinian Authority want us to be involved and engaged in helping and supporting and working with them to try to get to this period of calm. At some point, if either or both sides are not doing what we believe is necessary to get there, it will be hard or maybe futile for us to do that. So we have to look very carefully at that. But I also think that it's important for everyone to try to double down on the steps necessary to try to get there, because it's profoundly not in the interests of Israel, our close ally and partner, or for that matter, the Palestinian Authority, to see this cycle up.
Mr. Secretary, I appreciate the efforts, and the United States has been involved in trying to broker these agreements. I guess my question, and I'll just leave it with your last answer, is that, what are we prepared to do when we see violations of those commitments? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you.